I happened upon Hogan's angle by emulating the swing of the LPGA player with the most wins. The year was 1998, and I was having difficulty turning through the ball. She had said that she was having a hard time getting her weight off her back foot.
Transfer the weight all over to your left side. It's a transfer in the weight that gives you the power and the speed to get the ball somewhere.
And her coach recommended that she turn her head to follow the ball, along with the ball. And she started out with pitch shots, and she found that it worked really well. And when I tried this, I too was able to turn through the ball. The single thing that I struggle most with in the game is turning through the ball. Ironically, my name Keern literally translates to turn from Dutch to English. When you turn through the ball, though, like she did, turning your head before impact, what you're not doing is you're not moving down along with the ball so much as your focus becomes on impacting the ball, because you're not looking at it, you can't take it for granted. So in your mind, the last thing that happens after you've turned and you've looked is impact. And so what you have to do is visualize an intersection between the line and the ball at impact, and that intersection is at a bit of an angle. It invariably is. I would later realize that angle parallels the quarter turn of the front foot that Hogan describes. At the time, though, I cut my average score in half. I started shooting in 36-hole tournaments. I started shooting scores in the 140s. I would have scores down around par. Prior to then, my better scores were like 77, 78. So I'd broken a plateau. After that year was 1998. I moved to a small course with a lot of trees, and I started to over-focus on the line and lost the ability to make that motion.
You came out with Hogan's Angle in 2008. What about the game of golf has changed since?
At the time, and I was an avid reader and follower of mainstream golf instruction. Golf Digest does a great job of describing what we see in the golf swing. It's a what you see is what you get approach. People's ideas of golf instruction, though, were essentially just gimmicks. We still see it. One gimmick or another is going to fix it all. What I was proposing was a radical change in people's assumptions. Anybody can latch onto a gimmick because it lets your assumptions remain intact. But what I had realized and what I started to understand created the uniqueness of Hogan's swing was such a deviation from what you assume happens in the golf swing. It's not a gimmick. People looking for Hogan's secret were looking for gimmicks. They were looking for little moves that would work into your assumptions and just make you play better golf. Well, the reason Hogan's secret remained a secret for so long is because it challenged people's assumptions. Even when you read 5 Lessons, Herbert Warren Wind went into 5 Lessons, a very well celebrated golf writer, and he had all of the assumptions that every other golfer has. He'd been well versed on the subject. So when you read the book, the first 4 chapters really uphold assumptions too well. My recommendation, when you read 5 Lessons, read the 5th chapter first, read the other 4, and read the 5th chapter again. I strongly believe that when Hogan was working with Herbert Warren Wind and Anthony Ravelli, he had in Wind somebody who had preconceived notions, and Ravelli somebody who was just an artist, who was just going to draw what he saw, draw what he was instructed to do by Hogan. Hogan had to systematically break down Wind's assumptions to the point to where he could get the words to match the intentions, and it didn't happen until he was finally into the summary chapter. If he could, I think he would have Wind rewrite it a little bit to be more specific about what exactly he was driving at. To him, though, thanks to the fact that the illustrations exist, he was able to tell the full story in depictions, in illustrations, and that to him fulfilled his mission. Unfortunately, there are plenty of instructors out there now who refuse to throw away the assumptions, even though we are seeing evidence over the last nearly 14 years since Let It Drop and let people pick it up on their own.
You came out with Hogan's Angle in 2008. What about the game of golf has changed since?
Wow. At that time, what I came up against was some really peculiar notions about what Ben Hogan's secret could have been. And truthfully, it's not surprising because so much golf instruction is about the next gimmicky maneuver that's going to step your game up. I mean, if people follow golf instruction, they're going to go from one gimmick to another gimmick to another gimmick. When I challenged people's assumptions, they really, I'll have to give some people credit. They're like, okay, where do I go from here? What does this mean? I think I get it. But that was a scant few. The vast majority thought that I was really off my rocker. Now, there are people, actually more and more people, after this 15-year period, have come to terms with the idea of an intersection with the line, and that intersection was what Hogan was driving at. Unfortunately, though, a lot of people out there want to lay claim to this as if it was their idea. Truthfully, I knew when I sort of let it rest that there would be people who would catch on, but golfers are stubborn. They like to believe in their own wills, and there are a few who will attribute what they know and what they're willing to share with the golfing world to the originators of the ideas, whether it was me and they're just, putting it in their own terms, or whether it was Hogan and they respect the fact that that man made huge strides in golf theory, the largest by far of anybody who's ever played the game. And we don't even know the effects yet. Frankly, we don't know how good Hogan's instruction was because so few people are applying it. People think that their assumptions about the golf swing can continue even after they've integrated Ben Hogan's lessons into their game. The simple fact is, Ben Hogan's secret remained a secret for so long because in order to use it, you had to drop your assumptions. Right now, it's a much better time for me to be making videos about golf because there are people out there who, whether they want to claim they always knew it, which if they did, why didn't they come out with it before? Or they want to pretend that Hogan's secret hasn't been happened upon, which is a great way of saying, I want all of the success to myself. People are determined that if they pretend Ben Hogan's secret hasn't been discovered, other people will leave it lie, will neglect it, and they can enjoy all the benefits in their game. And there are instructors who are attempting to get around this very, very large deviation from the accepted golf swing and sort of in peculiar ways input their own methodologies that are going to steer the student in the right direction without ever actually giving credit to Mr. Hogan or myself for having uncovered this information. My feelings on those people is that they're charlatans, plain and simple. They're charlatans who are refusing to recognize the great man, Mr. Hogan, and they're a disgrace to the game of golf.
That's a strong statement. You said, though, that there are people who are attributing their instruction to Hogan. Can you name them?
I can. There are a couple that come to mind, and they both have their interpretations or their way of expressing themselves, which are unique to them. One, I really enjoy his work. He thinks more about the golf club than I feel is necessary to what I garner from Hogan's instruction. But I can see how that's easier for a person to wrap their mind around than simply swinging the handle. Kind of a perplexing concept, truly. The first person I heard say swing the handle, a person who leads me to believe probably understands Hogan better than he lets on, but keeps that information between himself and his students, is Butch Harmon. Butch Harmon said swing the handle years ago. I think he probably understands Hogan really quite well. Although I have to say I saw that. But Butch gets paid to teach people at the top level, and he's got his niche. For the people out there who are sharing their information with the general public, there's a guy, Speed Golf TV, I think is his channel on YouTube. He's incredibly expressive. That's the only way I can term it. And he attributes his knowledge to Maruch, or I think he says Marucci. And it seems, he gives credit. He's like, hey, I've been impacted by this information, and I'm willing to give back. That's the idea, is giving back to the game. Another person the person who really ties what he's teaching into the golf club more so than I would think would be necessary, overhand golf and the Holy Grail. He understands that that his interpretation, overhand golf, stems from Hogan. Everybody knows that Hogan's secret is the Holy Grail, and he's willing to put that out there. I'm not going to name the instructors who are pretending they can cut Hogan out of the loop, or anybody else who's sincerely working on making golf better, on giving Hogan credit, but they're there. They're out there, and they're pretending. They're pretending that they're teaching something that is original to them. It's false attribution. The magic of Hogan's angle is that those people who truly attribute Hogan's angle to Hogan are doing something so distinct that if they do it right, there's no denying the fact that it deviates from the norm. You'll know if you're getting instruction, if it's too close to your assumptions, that it's not the modern fundamentals of golf.
You've talked about instructors. Are there players who are using Hogan's angle?
I have to say, I've seen evidence, naturally, since the time Hogan's angle came out. Instructional videos, websites, some online postings of information that permeated through the golf world appear to have impacted the golf swings of at least one tour player in that time. What exactly that information consisted of when it got to that player, I couldn't exactly say, but he has said that when he was in college, he decided to make a change, and that change resulted in a fade. And when we look at his fundamentals, we look at the positions he reaches in his swing, his downswing, his maneuvering of his hands, coming down and then through impact, we see effects. And not only that, I think it's safe to say, he's probably the first to admit, that if he hadn't made those changes, he would probably be doing something other than playing tournament golf as a professional.
Are you going to tell us who that player is?
That would take the fun out of it now, wouldn't it? Many consider him to be the best ball striker on tour. I guess that's some evidence that Hogan's methods, when done correctly, when the assumptions about the golf swing are broken down, do have a positive effect. One of the things this player says is that when he hits his wedge shots, he does so with an open face and a draw motion. That is some semblance of Hogan's angle. Let's go back to Annika Sorenstam for a minute and think about how dominant she was playing the game. A golfer's feels are unique to them. Tiger's done an excellent job of describing his feels. The way that he applies his right hand coming into impact is very important to him. We see that. And that's indicative of Hogan's approach. One of the things that's unique to me about Tiger's swing that makes it radically different than Hogan's, and I think we'll all admit, flat left wrist at the top, unlike Hogan's cupped left wrist, but then the way his legs compress to begin the downswing, that leads me to believe that he was buying himself a little bit of time to transfer the club from the lead hand into that right hand release hand so that he could apply force at the bottom with his right like he wanted to. Hogan, on the other hand, he didn't do that compression by your time movement. Instead, when he cupped his left wrist at the top, what that does, that cupping of the left wrist, is it rests the weight of the golf club on the right thumb pad. So if you don't cup the wrist, if you have a flat wrist, your left wrist, maintains control over the club, and your right hand is just along for the ride. If you do cup the wrist, then the weight of the club rests on the right hand, and your right hand is engaged. That was Hogan's major point in the Time magazine article about cupping the wrist. He wanted people to understand how to apply force with their dominant hand. Again, a major deviation from one of the big assumptions that people make about the golf swing, that the golf swing is controlled, or its major determinant is the lead hand, and the trail hand, as they put it, is along for the ride.
You said Tiger did Hogan-like things. Are you saying his dominance came from that?
I don't think there was even a question. I mean, it's hard to hit the whole gamut of golf shots swinging a golf club with one arm. You know? There are a lot of good players who do that, have functionally gorgeous golf swings, but take them off the driving range and put them on uneven lies and so on, and they struggle. Struggle to them is far different than struggle to the rest of us, but Tiger beats them because Tiger applies force with the dominant side of his body, and that force is what makes it possible for him to hit all those different shots. Of course, Tiger absolutely benefited from his understanding of the same principle that made Hogan dominant after 1946. Well, on the subject of instruction, as it relates to Tiger, we've seen him doing this drill lately where he sticks his butt out. And people will say that's what he's doing, he's sticking his butt out. If you don't understand why, and yeah, you think that it's about spine angle and stuff. So much of instruction is based on what you see is what you get, that you're not getting the right instruction. What's the feel? Okay, so what must you be feeling when you do that motion in order for that motion to matter? It's a great question, and the answer is right here in front of you in the very title of this channel. That is how you execute that drill you see Tiger doing correctly. On the subject of people who appear to have caught on to this information, there's another one. He's running for president right now, and it looks to me like his backswing was inspired by Hogan's angle. Yeah, he's got a little backwards. But then, Bobby Jones took it back to the inside like that too. So, I mean, there's some promise in at least recognizing it exists. It's sure a lot better than thinking that the object of swinging the golf club is to take it back in a wheel, create a wheel. It's more complex and interesting than that. Knowing where the golf ball is at impact is critically important. And we can safely say that the only way to determine the location of an object is to create an intersection. One line, the line to the target, you have another line. That line, that intersection, is the location that you're looking for. When you turn your head like Annika Sorenstam did, your mind stays back, and the last thing that happens is impact. Everything else has come before it. You've done it all correctly. All you have to do is meet the ball at that intersection.
You say you're broken? Care to describe how?
Well, going back nearly 25 years to when I lost my golf swing that was based on Annika Sorenstam's, and I was left wondering why the best way for me to play golf was to turn my head before impact. How such a strange move was the one choice that I could make to play the game well. At that time, I tried to become a club pro, and I tried to do so without doing unusual things. I tried to use standard methodologies, and in 8 tries, the closest I could get to passing the PAT which is the player's ability test. For anybody who doesn't know, is the admission test to get into the PGA program is a playing test. And you basically, depending on the difficulty of the course, have to shoot 276s in one day. I managed under a provisional allowance to shoot an 18-hole round that was on the number by knocking a wedge to 3 inches on the very last hole and making that birdie. And that provisional 18-hole round was higher than a 76. So 8 tries, pretty tragic, very, very unbecoming of a club pro, but I felt I couldn't use the unusual techniques that I'd lost, that Sorenstam motion of looking before I made impact, because you can't teach that, right? At least I didn't think you could teach that at the time, until I started to connect the dots with Hogan's swing. And then in 2008, I tore a ligament in my left wrist. Still trying to look down at the ball through impact. I had hit a low drive into a 310-yard par 4 because the wind was blowing a good 30 miles an hour straight at me. And I supinated my lead wrist pretty far enough that at impact, this ligament tore. It felt like a bomb going off in my wrist. Within 2 years, I would not be able to take the club back. That was the same time period when I started to actively espouse Hogan's angle. I think my feeling was that if Hogan's angle was out there, people could take non-traditional approaches, the kind of approaches they needed in order to implement this technique. And maybe the same thing that happened to me would not happen to others.
That wasn't the end of your effort, so would you like to go into that?
I had a choice. I could give up the game, because I could no longer play right-handed, as if it mattered, because I could no longer play to the best of my ability anyway. Or I could take it up left-handed, and I decided to do the latter. The left-handed golf swing has proven to be time-intensive. It's taken 14 years to get anywhere near as good as I was right-handed within the first couple. That's instincts. On the plus side, I don't feel like I need to do that Sorenstam lookup move left-handed, which has made it possible for me to more accurately explore what Hogan did. Although I will say this, when I first saw Shell's Wonderful World of Golf, there was a face-on view of a wedge shot that Hogan hit in which his head moved in an unusual way. It was very Sorenstam-like, truthfully. Like there was a before impact movement of his head. When I look at it now, though, I see people's versions online that they share, and I don't see that wedge shot. Again, when it comes to Ben Hogan's secret, when you've discovered Ben Hogan's secret, the best thing for golfers to do, in their minds, is conceal the fact that it's been discovered so that they can use it for themselves without concern over other people also finding the secret. But what it takes is a broken person who feels his greatest contribution to the game of golf is to pay credence to Mr. Hogan and to create the change that he knew was possible.